Good day, everybody. This is Zemar Silvertooth, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. We're recording this on May 25th, 2020. It is Memorial Day here in the United States, so a respective and solemn observance of that day hopefully is expressed and executed by you. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, overcast weather. We're doing okay. Hopefully you're safe and sound wherever you are listening to our show. Doing everything like everyone else, or trying to do everything like everyone else, staying indoors, not doing too much activity in big groups, but we're working through it. And as we break down the show and go throughout, it looks like the sporting world is starting to find its way back onto the fields, courts, tracks, and courses, and everything else that you can think of, trying to bring some normality to the world, but still some hurdles to be jumped. But we actually have some live sport activities to talk about. On today's broadcast, though, we'll start with Atlanta United and Major League Soccer and their attempts to get back onto the field with individual training. I have some thoughts on that. We also will go into technical state of Georgia athletics. A major college sports announcement was made this past week that affects every single program, not only in the state of Georgia, but throughout the United States. I'll break that down. And then finally, Miscellaneous Department, we'll talk about NASCAR, golf, professional wrestling, NFL, and Major League Baseball. We'll touch on all of those kind of in the speed round portion of our show. But as always, to follow everything that we're doing, you head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can also go to Twitter and Instagram and go to our pages on those sites. Just search Sports Inquirer, that's all one word. You do that, and you'll be able to, as far as Twitter and Instagram, subscribe to us, follow us, and you'll get everything that we're doing on our site. Under Facebook, you go to one of our two pages under The Sports Inquirer or Sports Inquirer. Well, either one of those, you'll get updates on everything that we're doing. Finally, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud. You go to those pages or those sites as well and look up The Sports Inquirer, and you will get not only constant updates of everything that we're doing, but also archives of our previous shows and podcasts from the Sports Inquirer Show that you're listening to now. To Verbal Submission, which is our mixed martial arts / professional wrestling / combat sports show that we, Lord willing, will hopefully record tomorrow. There's been a lot going on in those worlds. You also will get all of our archives, all of our interviews, and it's been a slow period for us, unfortunately, because a lot of our site or a lot of our business is getting good interviews and good pressers and things along those lines, and those aren't happening for obvious reasons. And spring is a really bad time too, because Atlanta United was going to be in full swing. The Atlanta Dream and the WNBA were going to be in action. We've done some college sports. Just down the line, the Hawks would have been finishing up their regular season, so we would have had some content there as well. And the college sports, probably some Georgia State, Kennesaw State, Georgia Tech, and things along those lines. All those spring sports from baseball and softball and some other ones as well. But those are the breaks. Those are things that are going on right now. So we got to keep it moving and keep it going. But as I said, if you go to YouTube and SoundCloud under The Sports Inquirer, you go to either one of those pages, just do a quick search, and you'll find out everything that we are doing. First part of the show that we're going to discuss, first part of this show, we're going to discuss the professional soccer world returning to the field in the original free kick. We'll start with Atlanta United and Major League Soccer because that's our domestic league here in the United States, and once we start there, then we'll expand out to Germany and some other leagues around the world. Now, Major League Soccer has started individual training, and that's included Atlanta United. So, starting on May 1st, players were able to begin to use outdoor team training facilities for individual workouts, and they had to comply with some detailed health and safety protocols, and also work with medical and infectious disease experts. And the individual workouts were voluntary, and they cannot conflict with any local public health official or government policies. So here in the state of Georgia, not getting political, but compared to other states, it's been relatively lax. Well, not lax, but a little bit more open. The parks are open. Businesses have been able to have, from beauticians to the nail salons and things like that, restaurants have been open for the past few weeks, and that has allowed for more activity and more things going on. And if you trickle it down to the sports world, that means that individual workouts can take place. And individual workouts, at least here in Atlanta, or in the state of Georgia, they prohibit access to club facilities, and that includes locker rooms, team gyms, and team training rooms. And those rooms may only be used to assess post-operative and rehab treatments. So if the guys are recovering from surgery or getting treatment for an injury, they can use some of those facilities under strict guidelines. But the guys have been on the field doing individual workouts and doing some drills as far as with cones and different entities there. Now, MLS announced on May 14th that it had extended the small group and team training moratorium through June 1st. So, as we're recording this on May 25th, what that means is that teams cannot gather in small groups and do their drills at this current time. I think what that really means, and first of all, let's hear from Brad Guzan. He discussed it during a media conference call or a Zoom conference. I guess what I say Zoom. It's a media conference call too. I guess technically we're trying to figure out what we call these things, these media pressers or these Zoom calls. But he spoke with the media through Atlanta United, and by the way, thanks to Atlanta United Media Communications for providing the audio that you're hearing on today's shows as far as the players go. They've been very accessible and very good as far as providing the media like myself an opportunity to ask questions and get some good audio and video of the players at their various locations. So thank you to Atlanta United Communications. Before we play Brad's comments, let's hear from Brad Guzan, goalkeeper for the team, and his thoughts on the player safety and the importance of it.
Personal opinion is similar to the Bundesliga and similar to the Premier League. There has to be a lot of questions answered still, and there has to be a lot of steps that will be taken to make sure that player safety is of the utmost concern and priority. And so that part is a given. We have to make sure that we don't cut corners. We have to make sure that we do everything in our power to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. With saying that, there's certainly going to be cases when you have such a large player pool, as we're seeing in England, like you mentioned. Everybody's individual case can present challenges and can present difficulties with them coming back to train. And so you can't look at this from a one size fits all sort of idea. You have to make sure that you take into account that every individual may have something different going on at home, behind the scenes, and we have to make sure that we cater to everybody that has those types of situations going on.
So that was Brad Guzan from Atlanta United discussing the importance of the players' safety and acknowledging that there's more important things than being on the field and the protocols. And with Brad, it's also worthy to note that he is a significant contributor towards the MLSPA, the Major League Soccer Players Association, that just negotiated their new CBA deal earlier this year. So it's been tough times. You go from negotiating and taking care of all of that, which obviously when you're dealing with the Players Association and ownership, a lot of tensions there, just negotiations. I think it was a 6-year deal, I want to say, and a few months later, you're dealing with all this stuff. So it's like going back to the table with the same people that you had these tense negotiations with, and now trying to resolve some of these things. But Brad talked about that a little bit further. Now, the German Bundesliga has been in action the past 2 weekends, and they're the first major professional soccer league to be back in action since the shutdown due to the coronavirus. We've seen the games or the matches, and several things that you notice. One, no fans in the stands. And so that's been interesting. You can hear a lot more of the coaching and the interaction between the players as far as that goes. You see some rustiness from the players just because they have not been on the field for the past few months on a consistent basis. But they've been able to play matches I don't believe there have been any positive tests. There may have been, but I've not heard anything of major note. And it's going to happen eventually. I think this disease, or the virus, not disease, the virus is to the effect where it's never going to go away. It's going to be like our flu, where people are going to catch it and have significant medical issues, and some people may have it and may not exude or show the symptoms of it, and maybe a silent carrier. You know all of this if you're listening to the show. If you watch the news or watched any television or read any articles over the past 2 months, I'm not saying anything that's outside the norm. But I will say that when it does happen and you start having players test positive, or coaches or officials, what's the protocol? And that's what Brad was discussing, just what happens when all of that can go down. But the players want to see players play. And Brooks Lennon, another player for Atlanta United, he talked about seeing the Bundesliga and what they're trying to do, and maybe taking some cues from what he's seen from those matches and how that can carry over into Major League Soccer.
Well, first of all, it was just nice to see, soccer get back playing. It's great that, the Bundesliga is back up and running. I know they're taking all the safety, precautions that are necessary in order to be able to have everyone safely, playing. But yeah, I think 2 weeks of training is definitely it's a short time, but some decisions aren't going to be the best for you. But yeah, Schalke didn't end up coming in and having their best result, but I watched a lot of the games over the weekend, and it seemed like everyone was really happy to be back at it, and some teams had some really good results. I mean, it's good that we're doing all these individual trainings right now in Atlanta because it's definitely keeping us fit and sharp in preparation for whatever comes. I think whenever that decision is made by the league, I think we're going to be one of the teams that's ready to go from the start. So we just need to continue doing the best we can to stay fit and sharp, and when that decision's made, then we'll be ready.
And that was Brooks Lennon talking about the Bundesliga and seeing those guys playing and being back on the pitch. But Brooks, like everyone else, is also excited about the opportunity to get back on the field and as a team and play for Atlanta United and in Major League Soccer. So he also talked about the desire of the team or players to return to Major League Soccer action and what that would entail. So here's Brooks Lennon once again discussing that topic.
I'm not sure if we're going to have games or not. I know the league definitely wants to play games. I know I really want to play games this season, but as I said, and I think everyone around the league is saying, in order for us to get games in, we need to make sure that it's safe and, everyone's ready, to make that decision to play. But obviously I'm raring, to get back playing on the field, doing what I love, and hopefully that comes sooner than later. I think obviously they have small goals, big goals. They have a lot more equipment than I have myself. I just have a soccer ball and some cones. So they've got a lot more equipment that we're able to use. They have a bounce board, which is nice, to try and mimic getting some passes in with some teammates. So just a lot more equipment than I would have by myself. And also, there's coaches out there that are telling you exactly what to do, while monitoring, the fitness and making sure that, we're not over pushing ourselves, but we're also, making sure that we're doing enough.
And once again, that was Brooks Lennon discussing Atlanta United and the team trying to get back on the pitch. The proposal that we've seen now that's kind of has some legs to it and has some interest is the going to Orlando, Florida, and playing, I guess, some tournament-style matches that may affect the standings. I don't know what, as we record the show, we don't know how many teams will be. Well, I assume all the teams will be in it, but how many matches they would play, how many points would it carry towards the regular season standings? Meaning that we'll stick with Atlanta United if they're supposed to play Orlando or Portland, on their schedule. Are they going to play them down in Florida and those matches count the same? Or are they just going to throw those matches out and maybe play only matches within your conference? And will that entail maybe in a month or two actually playing at the arenas? The biggest issue there are a lot of issues, but I've always said the biggest issue that all the sports are going to have to deal with is travel. And that's where, or at least even the NBA, we'll touch on the NBA a little bit later, but they're kind of doing the same thing in Orlando, ironically. And Orlando is a hot spot for a lot of these things because Florida has been very similar to Georgia, really even more extensive than Georgia as far as allowing sporting events to take place. We've seen the WWE have their shows there, professional wrestling, AEW, another professional wrestling organization, have Mr. UFC, has had several fight cards. I think they've had 4 that have been in Florida since the COVID-19 virus has taken place. So Florida is a very hot spot, and plus the teams train there quite a bit for their preseasons. So there are a lot of fields there. There's some familiarity, but as I said, you eliminate the travel issue if you could have the teams come down there and not have an Atlanta flying on a plane going to Texas or the state of Washington or California, and maybe being in that environment and then carrying that over back into Atlanta or in the state of Georgia. That's how viruses spread in many ways. But the thing also is, if the good part is if you have it down in a centralized location, all the MLS teams, you eliminate the issue of different states under different rules. As I said, in the state of Georgia, we have our own rules, but I was born and raised in New York, and I have family up there. It's more of a lockdown in the state of New York than it has been in New Jersey than it has been in Georgia. So what about the Red Bulls or NYCFC? State of Washington with the Sounders, we know the issues that state of Washington's had with the virus. All the states have had issues now, and I said it's not going away. But if the state of Georgia is okay, but you can't go into the state of California, what about all the Los Angeles teams in San Jose and things like that? So that's where you're kind of looking at it from that perspective. I think what they ultimately would like to do is have the teams down in Florida. So usually that's good weather too. Even though it's warming up, it's the summertime, so weather's less of an issue than it is in the spring and the late winter for the colder weather teams. But you head down to Florida, you get to train, you have plenty of fields, and you play some matches, and that also counts as a training camp and gets these guys revved up so that maybe by the month of July or August, when you can go similar to the Bundesliga and have empty stadium matches, guys will be in shape and prepared to execute those, and you move on from there. So that's what we've seen from Major League Soccer and kind of the steps that they're taking in trying to get the teams back in action. And I transition over to Technical State of Georgia Athletics to talk about college sports and their steps and what they're trying to do. And the ruling has been by the NCAA is that a lot of the states, especially in the Southeastern Conference at least, can have voluntary workouts on campus June 1st. And when I thought about it, and this with college sports, the biggest issue that they have is that, two things. One, you're dealing with amateur athletes, and save your jokes about all the guys getting paid and they're really professionals. In the books, in the rules, they are amateur athletes. They are not paid like professionals. So while we're talking about the Major League Soccer and NHL and NBA and even the golfers, those are all the auto racers. They're all professionals. That's their job. They're compensated as such. The college athletes work in a different way. In a way that they are tied into the school, and if there's no school going on, there should be no athletics going on. And furthermore, if there are no students on campus, then you can't have the players on campus as well because they are students. So what this does, these voluntary workouts, and I guess you could say, I guess they can be on campus, not in classrooms like you would expect. I guess they stay with the online courses so that they're registered as students with the school. I should ask some family members. We have some family members in college right now, and they've been doing online courses. And I would assume that the summer session would start in mid to late June when these workouts can start up. So I guess they're going to have them online taking classes, and then they can do the voluntary workouts. I think these are good in a way, in several ways. One, you get some synergy with the guy, and these are all sports, not just we're thinking about fall sports as far as football, and it's the biggest sport, so that's understandable. But you have a lot of sports as far as softball and baseball, all of them going on in some form in the fall. But the big sports that really go on, you have soccer as well. Is you have soccer, you have volleyball and football. Those are main sports as far as the fall goes. I'm not counting basketball. That's more of a winter sport, and when you transition into that. But while the football athletes can do their thing, you have volleyball as well, and the soccer athletes. That's very important. So they get to go on campus, and as crazy as it sounds, and this ties into just the broad scope of things. When they canceled school in the state of Georgia, and wherever you're listening to this show in the United States or even abroad, one of my first thoughts is how will the kids get fed? Because a lot of students, a lot of the kids, high school, even all the way down to kindergarten, they get some of them, their only good meal is through the school. And you take that for granted when you're in your world and you can go to your local fast food place, your local supermarket, and get some bread or milk or water or whatever meat of choice and vegetables. But a lot of them, or this more than you think, that was their only good meal. And a lot of states have done a good job trying to keep these meals going for a lot of people. And school is a good way for that. If the college athlete struggles in that regard, is on campus, they can get meals, and that's big. They can get a hot meal and lodging. That's another big thing as well. If they're on campus volunteering, they can tie it into the campus. If they can get lodging, which is a dorm room or an apartment or a loft or something tied into these workouts, that's very important. And that's really needed for people who are lower income or are dealing with home issues that they can't be at home or they just can't get a good meal. So the good part is with these workouts, if they are executed right, they should be able to have a meal and lodging. And I know that doesn't tie into sports in general, but I'd also, one of your first thoughts is you got to look at it from a broad perspective because there are issues going on. So I'm glad in that regard if they're allowed to do that. But it also does get people ready for now they're not going to be wearing pads and doing the hitting and all that. It's not a fall camp. It really is. In these voluntary workouts, under normal circumstances, it's honestly like the guys, they'll do their own workouts. They'll go to a centralized area. My nephew went through this whole thing when he was a Division I football player. What they do is that they'll have their own workouts. They'll meet on the field or at the facility. And I think the strength trainer and maybe the medical staff can have access to the players. Now, the actual coaching staff, they have limited interaction with the players. And there's a lot of rules to it. It's the NCAA, but in essence, you can walk past somebody and say hello. It's not that bad, but the different rules and regulations. But there is a trained staff member there, and that's another good thing with this as well, is you have guys in organized workouts, not just at home and not being properly trained with a professional. They'll be on campus. They'll have guys who should know what they're doing, and they'll be guided through workouts in that regard. So that's a major ruling. Now, does that mean that we're going to see football the first weekend of September? We don't know that yet. There's still a lot of hurdles to jump with that. But if you have the kids on campus for these voluntary workouts, then it can lead to enrollment. And that's a big thing as well. that's going to be very interesting to see in the months of July and August when you start having enrollments and of regular students, not just the non-athletes. When they start going to campuses and doing freshman orientation or getting back on there, how is that going to be handled? Are dorms going to be normal like they are? You put two strangers in the same room, that could be rough. So we'll see what happens there. But it's a step in a good direction that these guys can at least have some workouts in, and we'll see what happens there. Hopefully, we'll talk to some administrators from our normal sources at Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and some others to get a more of a breakdown of what's going on once these voluntary workouts start and can begin taking place. So we're on top of it. We'll try to get you some more news and notes there. And we're going to wrap up the show with the Miscellaneous Department. I'll touch on a few topics that have been going on. NASCAR's back in action. Coca-Cola 600 took place. Brad Keselowski won the contest. A lot of rain, a lot of delays. I must admit, I did not last the entire race. There's a lot going on there. I fell asleep. I'm getting older. So I did not make it through the entire race, but it's good to see him back in action as far as the racing goes. You see the protocols that they're executing. I've always said that the sports with the lesser interaction and least amount of people, the more likely you'll see them back in action. Meaning, golf's a definite. You're definitely going to see golf, and we saw the match play contest with Peyton and Phil and all that stuff. Golf's going to be back in action, I think, within the next 2-3 weeks. So LPGA and PGA, you can get away with having no people in the stands and the galleries and just the player and the caddy. You can work around that. NASCAR or auto racing, you have the guys in their own individual bubbles. Now you have the pit crew and you have the support staff, and there's a lot of interaction there. But there are ways you can work around that. There's not one contact. That's what soccer and football, and especially like basketball and hockey, that's half the game is body-to-body contact. So when you have that happen, you got to be very, very more cautious. You're cautious in every way, in every sport, but more cautious as far as how that goes. So NASCAR's been back in action. I didn't watch too much of that golf match between Mickelson, Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, and Peyton Manning. I know they raised a lot of money, and that's awesome. And half their theme was about the meals, feed America and things along those lines. And you heard my kind of rants and thoughts on that. So that was good as far as feeding people. But the week before that, we had the Rory McIlroy and Ricky Fowler, Dustin Johnson, and I don't remember the fourth player. They had their exhibition contest. So you're starting to see golf find its way back onto the course, and that's a good thing. So very intrigued by that and seeing what's going on there. I saw Darkside ring the episode on Owen Hart. I'll touch on it more in our next show or my verbal submission, and I'll delve deeper into it as far as professional wrestling goes. But it's a show that if you're not familiar with professional wrestling, it's worth the watch. Now, I will warn you in a way that they talk about a lot of infamy and a lot of bad things that happen. So you've heard the last few episodes have been about the death of Road Warrior Hawk, and this one was about the death of Owen Hart and Gio Gonzalez. So it was this season as well. So it deals with a lot of, and Chris Benoit was the excellent season premiere, the two-parter. So it does talk about a lot of the passing of these professional wrestlers, but it's very well done. You get different perspectives. You get a relatively unfiltered view of things. This past episode, you heard the Martha Hart, the widow of Owen Hart, who in his death. You hear from her and her courage and her fight to find resolution with this tragic passing during the WWF, back then, pay-per-view match when, as the Blue Blazer, his character, he fell from the scaffolding on top of the arena into the ring and died tragically, and the implications and results of that. So they did a very good job of breaking all of that down. But I've been watching a lot of documentaries. We have time to do it. We're sitting at home for the most part. So that was very well done, and just wanted to comment on that. So I like that. The NFL Rooney Rule expansion. We discussed this on our previous show, how I did not think that the Rooney Rule should be tied into or incentivized with compensation for the team as far as draft picks. That was shot down, and now they are requiring, I think, an extra. Usually, you have to interview one minority for a head coaching spot. I think now you have to interview two minorities, and they also abolished the rule or amended the rule where assistant coaches in the playoffs can now talk to teams that are looking for new head coaches. That one I completely agree with. I think, and this is beyond minorities. I don't understand how you're currently working as an assistant and you want to interview for a promotion or a job at a higher position, and even though your team's in the playoffs, that you can't handle both at the same time. I've never understood that. And I think a lot of people, I think it was aimed towards minorities, but some guys have been hurt by having to wait all the way to the Super Bowl if their team makes a big run to be hired onto the staff. Now we've seen it happen. We've seen, like, I remember Dan Quinn here in Atlanta with the Seahawks. They made a big run in the playoffs. They just held off their press conference or the announcement. We had it with Kyle Shanahan when he was the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, and we knew he'd end up being the 49ers head coach. So they just waited all the way to the Super Bowl, and when that ended for that announcement to be made. But still, I didn't like how you had to wait all that time just for guys to get hired into a position. So I think that was a good ruling and a good adjustment. If anything, talking about the draft rule compensation or draft pick compensation with the Rooney Rule, if it got the discussion going, got people more aware of it, I guess that's a good thing. But I think that was a solid choice overall. And then baseball, Major League Baseball, trying to find a way back onto the field. I'm concerned about baseball. All these other sports that we've talked about, Major League Soccer, we've delved into the NBA. They have proposed or planned to have teams in Orlando maybe as early as mid-June to start in July with their postseason or playoffs or whatever form you want to have. There seems to be an agreement with the non-playoff teams. They want to shut it down and just go straight to the playoffs. NHL has found some neutral sites that be of interest to get things going. Baseball is still at an impasse, and you got to be concerned. We're at Memorial Day. We're at May 25th, and baseball's going to need at least a month of spring training of some form to get back onto the field. So that means you have to get on the field. If you want to at least have maybe 80 to 100 games, you got to figure you start early July, 4th of July weekend, play through July, August, and September. That gives you like 90 days to get 85 games in, or 80 games. And then you start in October with the normal postseason in the calendar. Or maybe you extend it out to maybe you start the playoffs in mid-October. But you have to get on the field to even start that. And there's been a lot of tension between the players and the Players Association, led by Tony Clark. And you've had players like Bryce Harper and Blake Snell be very vocal about financial incentive and compensation being a major part of their return to the field, just as much or maybe bigger than safety. So you have that going on. And then you have owners. They're leaking out these emails from the MLBPA. So there's a lot of tension going on because they realize, the owners, and I said that we should have, or they should have if you're getting paid X amount of dollars for this year, you prorate it, you make it per game, and you just do it that way. The owner's response is that, well, a lot of our money now the good part, the TV, a lot of their money is TV money, and especially the playoffs. So that's a good thing, but they get so much money from the gate, from tickets, the ticket prices, ticket itself, to concessions, parking, souvenirs. All those things are tied into the baseball ownership making money. So they're pretty much not crying foul, but saying that our revenue coming in is not going to be as big as it was in the past, so we can't necessarily prorate the money like most would suggest. Point is, I'm very concerned about baseball coming back this season. I think they may shut it down for the entire 2020 campaign. Furthermore, this is the last deal under the current labor agreement. So they're in contention, similar to how Major League Soccer was the beginning of this calendar year, because they were heading towards the end of their labor deal. Major League Baseball is in the same boat. So not only are they trying to negotiate for this current coronavirus world, they're trying to talk about the next 5-10 years, and we don't know we don't know what the salary structure will be. We're assuming that we'll eventually be back to having people in the stands and everything like that, but will our the economic structure of the world and then baseball, will that be the same now in we'll say 2021, non-coronavirus, to 2025 or 2026? We don't know that. So they're trying to negotiate the current and the future at the same time, and that's very tough. So hopefully by the time, maybe the next 24, 48 hours, you get an announcement, but nothing's going to happen today on Memorial Day. But if we don't have, well, I'm talking to you this time next week on, let's see, what's next week? It is June 1st. If I'm talking to you on June 1st and we're in the same situation as we are now with Major League Baseball, be very concerned. And that's where we're going to end today's show. Thanks for listening. As always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, the sportsinquirer.net premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can also head to Twitter and Instagram under Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Facebook, go to The Sports Inquirer or Sports Inquirer, either one of those pages. And if I subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under The Sports Inquirer. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.